The iron wheels screamed against the rails as the train jolted to a stop at Silver Bluff Station. Steam hissed from the engine, curling into the September air like restless ghosts. Clara Hart pressed her gloved hand to the window, watching the platform appear through the vapor. Rough planks, a water tower, and beyond that, the endless Montana sky. She had left Boston 43 days ago with Edmund Denton's letters tucked in her traveling case. Mail order bride. The words still tasted bitter, like weak coffee gone cold. But choices were few for a woman of 26 with no family and little savings. Edmund's letters had promised stability, companionship, and the chance to help run his dry goods business. She had imagined a life of quiet respectability. That seemed enough. The porter dropped her trunk on the platform with a heavy thud that echoed her heartbeat. Clara smoothed her navy dress, the best of her three, and stepped down. The air here felt thinner, sharper, carrying the scent of sage and horse leather instead of coal smoke. "Miss Hart?" She turned. A thin man stood waiting, hair slicked back with too much pomade, fingers soft and pale. Edmund Denton looked older than his letters had suggested, and his mouth pinched like someone who'd been sucking lemons. "Mr. Denton," she said politely, offering her hand. He barely touched it before letting go. "There's been a change in circumstances." The platform tilted slightly beneath her feet, or maybe that was just her heart. "I don't understand." "My situation is altered," he said quickly. "I've decided against remarriage." He reached into his coat, pulled out a leather pouch, and the sound of coins clinked between them. "For your troubles. The return train leaves tomorrow morning." For a moment, Clara couldn't speak. Around her, the crowd stirred, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. Mail order bride. Sent back. Poor thing. Her spine straightened. She had scrubbed floors in Boston. She had survived typhoid. She would not break now. Before she could answer, a low, steady voice spoke from behind. "Keep your money, Denton. Compensation isn't the same as honor." Quote. Clara turned. The man standing there looked as if he'd been carved from the Montana land itself. Broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes the color of winter sky. A cowboy hat shaded his features, but there was strength in every line. "Carver," Edmund snapped, "this isn't your concern." Maybe not, but the stranger didn't move. Leaving a woman stranded reflects on all of us. Wade Carver, the name passed through Clara's mind like a half-remembered tune. Even in Boston, she'd heard it. Owner of the Triple C Ranch, the biggest spread in 3 counties. A man with wealth built from sweat, not inheritance. Before she could say more, a commotion erupted near the freight depot. A wagon lurched sideways, its wheel catching in the platform gap. Barrels tumbled like dominoes, one rolling straight toward her with terrifying speed. Clara froze. The world shrank to the sight of that barrel hurtling closer, iron bands spinning, splinters flying. Then, strong hands gripped her waist, lifting her clear as the barrel smashed into the bench where she'd stood moments before. Wood exploded into kindling. The sound echoed like thunder. When the dust settled, Clara found herself pressed against Wade Carver's chest, his arms still wrapped around her, steady as iron. She could hear his heartbeat, slow and strong beneath the rough wool of his coat. "You hurt?" His voice was quiet, close. "No," she said, though her knees trembled. "I'm fine." He set her down gently, hands lingering just long enough to be sure she could stand. His gaze met hers, not the way men usually looked at women, measuring beauty or value, but as if reading her, trying to understand something deeper. "Thank you," she managed. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Around them, the platform buzzed with gossip and excitement, but Edmund Denton was gone, vanished into the crowd, leaving only shame behind. "Miss Hart," Wade said, breaking through the whispers, "you have plans?" The lie came easily. "I'll manage." "You got somewhere to stay?" Quote. "The Riverside takes lodgers." He nodded slowly, then studied her again, measuring, deciding. "I'm looking for a housekeeper, temporary, 3 months through winter, room, board, fair wages. At the end, you choose, stay on, or I'll buy your passage anywhere you want to go." First class. The offer hung between them like a rope bridge over a canyon. Behind her lay humiliation and an empty boarding room. Ahead, uncertainty, but also possibility. "Your wife wouldn't object?" she asked carefully. "No wife," he said simply. "Just me, my foreman, and 15 hands. Big house going to waste." The watching crowd leaned in, hungry for more scandal. Clara's mother's voice echoed faintly in her mind. "When one door closes, find a window. And if the window's locked, build your own door." "I accept," Clara said. 3 months, as agreed. Something in his eyes shifted. Respect, maybe, or surprise. "Wade," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His palm was rough, calloused, but his grip, careful, steady. He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Wagons this way." The crowd parted as they passed, whispers following like tumbleweeds on the wind. Clara kept her chin high, let them talk. She'd faced worse than gossip. The wagon waited, plain, sturdy, built for work. Wade set her trunk in back and offered his hand again. She took it without hesitation this time. "The ranch is 2 hours north," he said as he climbed up beside her. "Roads rough in places." "I'm not made of glass." That earned a ghost of a smile. "No, I don't reckon you are." He clicked to the horses, and they rolled forward. Clara didn't look back. Not at the station, not at Edmund Denton's retreating shadow. The road stretched ahead, uneven and unknown, leading toward mountains that scraped the sky. She drew her shawl tighter, feeling the chill of the open plains and the first faint stirrings of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. Small, fragile but alive. The rooster crowed at 4:30, but Clara was already awake. Her first morning at the Triple C. She stared up at the wooden beams, faint gray light, just beginning to creep through the curtains. The air smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and the wild scent of open land. She had work to do and a point to prove. She dressed in her plain brown calico, pinned her hair back, and lit the lamp. Downstairs, the kitchen waited, cold stove, dusty shelves, and a pump that groaned in protest when she drew water. Clara built the fire slow and careful, feeding kindling until the first flames licked to life. A good fire, her mother used to say, is like a good reputation. Build it steady, and it'll serve you all day. By the time the first men came in from the bunkhouse, the room smelled of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Boots thudded across the porch, and the door opened to a flood of cold air and rough laughter. They stopped short when they saw her. "Morning," Silas said, hat in hand. He was gray-haired, steady-eyed, and built like an oak post. "Coffee's ready," Clara said, nodding toward the mugs. One by one, the ranch hands filed past her, murmuring polite "thank yous." Most of them were still half asleep, but a few snuck curious glances, like they couldn't quite believe the boss had brought a woman into their world. When the skillet began to hiss, conversations started to rise again. Quiet at first, then comfortable. She fried salt pork, scrambled eggs, and baked biscuits that filled the air with warmth. By the time Wade Carver walked in, the men were eating like wolves, their talk easy now. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching. "Biscuits?" "Can't start a day on beans alone," she answered. His mouth twitched with something that might have been amusement. "Men say they're the best thing they've had since my mother cooked. That's saying something." "It's only flour and lard." "It's what keeps a man going after 10 miles of fence line," he said. "That matters." After breakfast, the hands scattered to their work, and silence returned to the big house. Clara cleaned until the kitchen gleamed, then took a deep breath and started exploring. The dining room held a table big enough for 20, its polish dulled by dust. The parlor felt lonely, the furniture arranged like strangers forced to share a room. Everything was functional, nothing lived in. Upstairs, her own room looked out over the corrals, where horses grazed in the pale light. From here, the land rolled forever, gold grass, scattered cottonwoods, distant mountains brushing the sky. The view stole her breath. She found Wade in his office after lunch, surrounded by ledgers and papers. He looked up when she entered, sleeves rolled to his forearms, ink smudged near his thumb. "Come in." "I brought food," she said, setting down a tray. "Beef stew, fresh bread, coffee." He moved the ledgers aside. "You didn't have to." "It's my job." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit. Might as well eat together. Easier to talk across a table than shout across the house." She hesitated, then sat. "What needs fixing first?" he asked between bites. "The stove needs blacking. The pantry's low on flour. The back steps have a loose board, and a few windows stick." He jotted notes with quick, precise movements. "Make a list. Silas will fetch what you need when he goes to town." She hesitated, then said quietly, "This house feels like no one lives here, like everyone's just passing through." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's one way to put it. My mother kept it different. After she died, He stopped, staring at the coffee cup. "Men don't think much about curtains and such. Would you mind if I changed a few things?" "I told you, whatever needs doing, do it." She nodded, noting how he said it. No hesitation. Trust. Plain and simple. That afternoon, she tackled laundry. The washhouse behind the kitchen smelled of lye and soap. Buck, the youngest hand, barely 19, offered to help. Together, they worked through piles of sheets and shirts. Buck chattered while he turned the crank on the wringer. "Mr. Wade's a fair boss," he said. "Pays on time. Stands up to the Crowley outfit when they try to push him off land." "The syndicate to the south?" "Yeah, bunch of snakes in boots. Been trying to buy him out for years. He won't sell. That's why folks respect him." Clara nodded, filing the name away. She'd learned long ago that Danger often wore fine clothes. By evening, fresh linens hung across the yard like flags. The air smelled of soap and sunshine. Tired but satisfied, Clara served supper, beans, cornbread, and canned peaches she'd found in the pantry. The men ate heartily, and for the first time laughter filled the kitchen. Later, she carried a plate to Wade's office. "You've been at that desk since noon," she said. He looked up, startled. "Didn't notice the time." She set the plate down. "Eat before it's cold." "Join me." She did, too tired to argue. They ate quietly. Outside, the night wind whispered through the cottonwoods. "You settling in?" he asked. "Fine," she said. "The men are respectful. The work's honest." "It's enough." "Enough," he repeated softly, studying her. "That word suits you." "I hope so." He smiled then, rare and real. "You've done more in one day than most folks manage in a week. My men say the house feels alive again. I reckon they're right." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's just cooking and cleaning." "No," he said simply. "It's making a home." Silence settled between them, comfortable and strange all at once. When she finally stood to leave, he said quietly, "That took sand today. Standing up to Denton, taking this job not knowing what waited. Most would have turned tail. You didn't." She met his gaze, steady. "I've had to learn not to break." He nodded once, slow. "Good. The land likes people with backbone." Clara smiled faintly, lifted the empty tray, and walked toward the door. Behind her, the fire cracked in the hearth. Outside, the moon hung low over the Montana plains. Tomorrow would bring another test. Out here, every sunrise did. But tonight, for the first time in years, Clara Hart slept in a room that was hers, and dreamed not of escape, but of staying. The scream tore through the calm afternoon like a gunshot. Clara dropped the bowl she'd been drying and ran for the barn. Men shouted, boots pounded, and the sharp smell of blood hit her before she even reached the door. "Give him room!" Silas barked. The men parted just enough for her to see Buck on the ground, pale and gasping. His arm hung at an awful angle, twisted and wrong. Blood streaked his face where a fence post had caught him. "What happened?" she demanded. "Horse spooked," Tom said grimly, threw him straight into the post. "Where's the doctor?" "Out delivering the Garrett baby. Won't be back till tomorrow." Clara knelt beside Buck, her mind steady even while her heart hammered. "We can't wait that long." She turned to the men. "Hot water, clean cloths, whiskey, and 2 flat boards for splints. Hurry!" They scattered to obey. She looked down at Buck, who tried to smile but only managed a grimace. "Hurts, Miss Clara," he whispered. "I know, sweetheart, but you'll be all right." Her voice was calm, like her mother's had been years ago when she'd stitched her father's hand after a factory accident. When the supplies arrived, Clara worked fast. She cleaned the cut on his head, stitched it neat and tight, while Silas held him still. She set his arm with careful precision, ignoring the tears that slipped from the boy's eyes. "Almost done," she said softly. "One more breath." There was a click, the bones sliding into place. Buck groaned, then went limp, breathing shallow but steady. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're going to be fine." "Let's get him inside," Wade's voice said behind her. He'd arrived unnoticed, breathless from the ride. His eyes took in the scene. Blood, sweat, Clara's hands shaking slightly as she tied the splint. "You did this?" Quote. "Yes." "Better than most doctors I've seen," he said quietly. Together they lifted Buck and carried him to the house. That night, Clara stayed by the boy's bed, bathing his forehead and keeping his fever down. Wade brought coffee and a blanket, his presence silent but steady. Near midnight, he said softly, "You saved his arm, maybe his life." "I just did what was needed." Most folks wouldn't have known how. Clara looked up. The lamplight softened his face, carving shadows that spoke of long days and quiet burdens. "You keep this place running," she said. "That's not so different." "You do what's needed, too." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound simple." Simple doesn't mean easy. The hours passed slow. Outside, coyotes called to the moon. Inside, Buck's breathing steadied, his fever broke, and the house fell quiet again. Wade finally said, "You've got a healer's hands, Clara Hart." She looked at him, tired but peaceful. "No, just steady ones." He studied her in silence for a moment, then said softly, "I'm glad that train brought you here." "So am I," she whispered. Days later, Buck was back on his feet, arm-bound but healing. The ranch ran smoother than ever. Clara's kitchen filled the air with the smell of bread and coffee each morning. Curtains hung in the parlor now, blue fabric that softened the hard edges of the house. For the first time since his mother's passing, Wade Carver's home looked lived in. But peace in the West never lasted long. It was near dusk when Clara caught the scent. Sharp, wrong, unmistakable. Coal oil. She stepped outside just as shadows shifted near the barn. Figures moved low and fast. Her blood turned cold. "Martha," she hissed to Silas's wife, who was helping with supper. "Get the shotgun, now." Outside, men with torches crept toward the barn. Crawley's hired guns. The syndicate had made good on its threats. "They mean to burn us out," Martha breathed. "Not tonight," Clara said. She propped the shotgun on the windowsill, took aim, and fired. The blast echoed across the yard. The lead man fell, torch flying harmlessly into the dirt. More shadows scattered. Clara reloaded, her hands steady. Gunfire answered, splintering wood above her head. Martha ducked beside her, reloading the second gun. "Dinner bell," Clara said. "Pull it!" The heavy bell outside rang loud and wild, echoing for miles, the ranch's call for help. Hoofbeats thundered from the darkness. Wade's men were coming. Clara fired again, knocking another torch from a man's hand. Then the yard exploded with sound, horses, shouting, gunfire. Through the smoke, Wade appeared, leading the charge. "Hold your ground!" he shouted. By the time the dust cleared, 3 attackers lay dead and the rest had fled. The barn still stood. The horses were safe. Wade found Clara in the kitchen, blood streaking her cheek from flying glass. "You hurt?" "Just a scratch." Quote. He took her face in his rough hands, eyes fierce. "You saved this ranch." "We saved it," she corrected. "Me and Martha. And you." His thumb brushed her cheek, slow and gentle. "You belong here, Clara. You always did." For once, she couldn't find words. Days later, they stood together before the courthouse in town. Crowley's men had been arrested. The whole county came to see justice served. Clara testified clear and calm, her voice carrying across the room. When the jury declared Crowley guilty, cheers erupted. Outside, Wade turned to her. "It's over." "No," she said, smiling up at him. "It's beginning." That evening, under the cottonwood trees by the creek, he led her to the half-built house he'd been working on in secret. Fresh-cut lumber glowed golden in the fading light. "This was going to be a surprise," he said, nervous for once. "A home, if you'd want to stay." Her heart swelled. "I don't just want to stay, Wade Carver. I want to build it with you." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, worn box. Inside lay a ring, simple gold set with garnets that caught the sunset. "My mother's," he said. "Her wish was that I'd find a woman with courage and kindness enough to make a home worth fighting for." Tears blurred her vision. "And you have." He slipped the ring on her finger, his voice husky. "Clara Hart, will you be my wife?" She met his eyes, steady as ever. "I already am in every way that counts. But yes, yes, Wade Carver." He smiled, and the whole world seemed to breathe again. They married a week later, the ceremony small but perfect. The ranch hands stood as witnesses. Silas read from a worn Bible, and the mountains held their vows like sacred echoes. Years later, Clara would wake before dawn to the sound of wind through the cottonwoods and the soft laughter of children playing on the porch. She'd pour coffee, watch Wade ride out across the land, and think how strange life was, how one man's broken promise had led her straight into everything she'd ever needed. People still called her the mail-order bride sometimes, half in jest, but the ones who knew the truth called her something else. Mrs. Clara Carver, the woman who turned a ranch into a home and a lonely man into a legend.